When you're ready.
All right. Well, I would like to call this meeting to order of the North Canton Planning Commission for the meeting of April 8th, 2020. The time is now 7:07. If we could have the clerk call roll, please.
Mr. McLeeser,
Present.
Thomas Sarah,
Present.
Brian Mahal,
Halson, here.
Mr. Volas,
Here.
and Mr. Del Paz. Eric Del Paz,
Here.
And thank you so very much. And it sounds as though we have all 5 members present. Since we are doing this in kind of a different orientation than what we normally do, I just wanted to give a couple little tidbits to maybe help us get through this evening a little bit smoother. I just want to remind everybody that if you could be in a quiet room, so maybe we don't pick up any noises of the microphone of your phone or your device. If you are not speaking and don't plan on speaking, we would appreciate it if you could go on mute when you're not talking. So with that, I think we'll roll into the first item on the agenda, which is the February 5th meeting minutes. And I trust all the members have had an opportunity to take a look at those.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Sarah. Is there a second?
Second.
Peter Volas will second.
And actually, maybe just as a bit of clarification, maybe if we could say, sort of like what Peter said, Peter seconds, that would be great. And I didn't hear who it was that seconded it before him, though.
This is Brian Mahalson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mahalson. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We could call the vote on that, please.
Mr. McLeeser,
Yes.
Mr. Del Paz,
Yes.
Mr. Saris,
Yes.
Mr. Volas,
Yes.
and Mr. Mahalshin.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. We will move on to item number 4 on the agenda, and this will be an adjudication hearing. And this adjudication hearing is going to be for its application number 20 NCPC-0001. It's a conditional use permit for a monument clock tower at Walsh University. And as this is an adjudication hearing, if we could have our court reporter please administer the oath to anybody who is wishing to speak on this evening.
Would you all please raise your right hands?
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, and we have had those who may wish to speak on this item sworn in. So at this point, I would invite the applicant to come up and tell us about this this project. And actually, as we're waiting for the applicant to come online and start talking, if we could ask all those who may speak tonight, especially the applicant, if you could state your name, the company you represent, and or the company you work for, and your address for the record, that would be great.
There's a Joe Camp. There's a Joe there. I know.
Mr. Van Gundy, do we know if we have somebody on the line to speak about the Walsh project?
I see a Joe as one of the attendees. I don't know if that's the architect of record, Mr. Kaplia. I will make a phone call here to find out if in the meantime, if you wanted to jump to the next item, which I believe Mr. Costin is on, representing the sanctuary fence, item number 6, I
Number
believe.
6. And maybe if Mr. Fox is on, would we, given this kind of unprecedented situation, would we need to take a motion and a vote to alter the agenda?
No, sir. I don't think just to take them out of sequence. They're all on the agenda, and I think all of those here in attendance are put on notice that they might start at a little bit different times, being about 7:13.
Okay.
I think it's permissible without that formality.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Yes,
So
sir.
with that, we're going to move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is going to be an application. It's a general development and final development plan for a proposed fence along the southern property lines of 9 parcels in the sanctuary. And do we have somebody on the line who can discuss this project with us? And when you do come on, if you could state your name and the company you work for and your address, please.
My name is Rich Costin. Bob Dehoff is going to do the speaking. Is he in here? Do we know?
Can you please speak louder, sir?
My name is Rich Costin. I'm with Lemon Development. Bob Dehoff was going to do the speaking tonight. Is he logged in?
I'm sorry, please repeat that name.
Rich Costin.
Oh. Hold on. Just,
Do you know if he called in, sir?
Yes, I can call in.
No, did he call in? Or do you know the last 3 digits of his phone number?
Eight 8153.
There, Mr. Dehoff just called in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, is this Mr. Dehoff?
Yes. Yes,
This
it
is
is.
Jamie from the Planning Commission. You are on live with our meeting here. I believe you were going to give us the rundown here for this sanctuary fence project. Is that correct?
I'd be happy to do that.
Fantastic. And just for the record, if you could state your full name, the company you represent, and your address, and then feel free to get going.
Yes, this is Bob Dehoff. I represent. I'm a partner with McKinley Apple Grove Ltd., the owner developer of the sanctuary.
I'm sorry, sir. We'll need to swear you in first before you speak.
Okay.
Okay? Just one moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Deha,
Yes,
do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now please feel free to, again, start with the name, your company address, and about the project.
Okay, this is Bob Dehoff. I'm a partner with Bill Lemon with the company McKinley Applegrove Ltd., which is the owner-developer of the sanctuary in this phase that we're talking about. And we would like to install this fence as proposed. It's a wooden fence along the proposed route that is indicated there on your should be on your exhibit before you. There was some discussion with Martin, and I think we had a preliminary meeting several weeks ago about should we build a wooden fence or a vinyl fence. We have built both at the St. James Place allotment, which is just north of the sanctuary in the North Canton school system. However, it is in Lake Township. And we built this particular fence design wooden, and then we also have built a vinyl fence. And that's been up for about 20 years, and over the course of 20 years, the wooden fence has frankly held up much better, more attractive than the vinyl fence. If a tree comes down or some damage to the vinyl fence to get a replacement, it's frankly doesn't match. And with the wooden fence, we don't have that problem. So the wooden fence is a little more expensive for us to install, and certainly more expensive to maintain. As you know, in the agreement that we have provided Martin, our HOA of the sanctuary is responsible to either paint or stain the fence at a minimum every 5 years. So we think it would be, frankly, a attractive fence for both our sanctuary lot owners as well as the lot owners that are on the south side and would be adjacent to the houses on 9th Street. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Dehoff. And at this point, I will throw it out to any comments from the city. Mr. Van Gundy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sound. Am I on now?
Yes, we have, Mr. Van Gundy.
Thank you. We have had several conversations in coordinating the project for the fence. All of the questions that were presented have been satisfactorily answered. In general, staff is in support of the project and recommends approval. With the one comment that I would like for Planning Commission to discuss is there is a portion in the code in 113308 which talks about the smooth side of the fences to face out. Now, I'm in agreement with the applicant that the side which has the architectural features is a little more of a pleasant side. And that's the intent of that section. The applicant is proposing to place that side of the fence that has the architectural feature towards the residents along 9th Street. Now, technically, that does not meet the letter of the law, if you will, for the zoning code. However, I believe the intent was to put the nicer side of the fence out and agree that that would be acceptable, provided there's no objection there.
This is Tim Fox, and I agree with, I believe the intent for that ordinance is that someone putting up a wooden fence that for your neighbor, when there is one side that's, I guess for a person, say a finished side, has the more attractive view, when you have that condition and then the less attractive on the other side, that the intent is that the one that's facing your neighbor will be the more attractive side. And I believe that was captured here.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. With that, I will throw it out there to the members of the Planning Commission. Are there any questions or
Let's
comments?
see the height of the fence.
I think 6 feet.
This is Brian Mahalson. Is the architect, what's being described as the architectural side of the fence, the side that shows the cross bracing?
That is correct.
So that would be facing the neighbor?
That would be facing the 9th Street property owners.
Okay, I wouldn't describe that as the more attractive side. I would call the smooth side the more attractive side, but that's
We'd
up for
be
debate.
happy to switch it.
Yeah.
Big mistake, but we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
I also wanted to throw out there, I think Mr. Dehoff, when we talked about this, we had talked about this being set off the property line, and I've heard that that is going to be set 2 feet inside of the property line on the sanctuary side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think also we had discussed, and again, just for the record, that 2 foot strip of land, if the abutting property owner, for whatever reason, would choose not to mow that, mowing of that one would fall on the responsibility of the homeowners association.
Would you repeat that? I couldn't hear that quite well.
Mr. McLean, sir, could you please repeat? Absolutely, yes. The fence is going to be set off 2 feet off of the property line inside the sanctuary. So there's 2 feet of land up against the existing property owner's land that they then would be.
So do you have your phone on? Oh, you can hear? Okay.
Ben, I've got YouTube pulled up next to me. It looks like we have a stream back now.
Yes,
But
I fixed it.
Okay.
We're good now.
So if we're clear to proceed, Mr. Dehoff, could you please repeat what you just were saying as we let bridge across there?
I'd be happy to. Yes, we have a declaration of a feature amenity easement that states that the HOA, and if I can just take a brief moment here, I'll just read this. Developers shall initially be responsible for the construction, repair, and maintenance of the fence built upon the easement property, which shall include painting and or staining the fence at least every 5 years and regular mowing and trimming, if necessary, of the 2 feet on the south side of the fence. At such time, the developer elects to assign this easement to the HOA, the association shall become responsible for the ongoing repair and maintenance of the fence, including the obligation to apply fresh paint and or stain every 5 years and the regular mowing and trimming, if necessary, of the 2 feet on the south side of the fence. Each lot owner shall maintain its own landscaping around the fence, if any, as well as the regular mowing and trimming on the north side of the fence.
Thank you very much for reading that. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the commission before we open it up to the public?
None.
None?
No.
Okay. At this time, I would open it up. I'm assuming, Ben, we have the capability of opening up to members of the community should they wish to speak.
Yes, we do.
Are we paused again, or are we waiting for members of the public?
If there are any members of the public currently in the call, everyone should be unmuted and able to speak.
Okay, thank you. At this time, if there's anybody who wishes to speak on this, please state your name and address. And it appears as though we don't have anybody who is interested in speaking on this, so I guess I will bring it back to the commission and I will put it out there for a motion.
This is Brian Mahalson. I would motion to approve with the stipulation that the smooth side of the fence face the south properties.
We have a motion on the floor from Member Milhausen. Do we have a second?
Tom Sarah will second it.
We have a motion and a second, and at this point, could we ask the clerk to please call roll?
Mr. McLeister?
Yes.
Mr. Dalpaz?
Yes.
Mr. Sarah?
Yes.
Mr. Volas?
Yes.
And Mr. Mahausen?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us, Mr. Dehoff, this evening. And with that, we will move on to, I guess, let's go back to if we had the applicant on the phone for our adjudication hearing for the monument clock tower at Walsh. At this time, I would ask if that applicant is here, if they could come off mute, give us their name, the company they represent, and their address. And we'd like to hear about this project.
This is Joe Caplia. Am I off mute?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Joe Caplia, 11700 Cleveland Avenue, Northwest Uniontown.
Excuse me, sir.
I am the architect for the Walsh.
Excuse me, Joe.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. We'll
Yes.
need to swear you in before speaking. Give me just
Okay.
one moment, okay?
Even though we swore it in before? Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead.
You were sworn in previously?
Well, I was on. You couldn't hear me. I was muted, but yeah, I was on, had my hand raised, and said I do when we did it the first time.
That's sufficient.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kapler.
Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. Should I go ahead and proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. In order to keep me on target, I basically put together an agenda, so I'll try to go through quickly and just hit the major points on the project. Martin, would it be possible to put up your different exhibits so that I could click on those as I'm going through? And that's a good start right there. Thank you. I'm just trying to see if I can move that. Anyway, just starting with it, this is for the Walsh Clock Tower / monument. This is part of the former BP site at Market and East Maple. We have 155 feet on the approximately on the East Market side and or the East Maple side, and 163 feet on the Market side. Totals about 0.57 acres. Last late summer, fall, North Canton approved the zone change from the original BP business to park and institutional and it was approved last, and I don't have the exact date, but it was last late summer, fall. And then if I could go to the next sheet, 1.2, please.
Hey, Joe, are you on the computer?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Bob.
If you would like to select take controls, you can go through those exhibits. We have several exhibits.
We do. So what do I need to do to click on that? Because my mouse is there.
Top of the screen, it says view options. If
Okay.
you push the mouse to the top and click on view options.
Okay.
And then request control.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if I'm getting control. I'm on Mr. DeHoff's letter right now.
Yeah, that's what we see.
I want to get to sheet 1.2, but I'm still not. It says you are controlling North Canton screen, but
We can see the screen moving and changing.
Yeah. Application. Okay. I can, yeah, I should be able to do it here. Okay. Okay. Come on. Okay, 1.2, so I can get there. All right, sheet 1.2. Again, this just shows the BP site on the corner, and it shows that we are basically more than 300 feet from the nearest residential use, which would be just south of McDonald's. I've got an arrow on there that shows that we are approximately 570 feet to the parcel with that residence on the corner. And this was, we just wanted to have the campus map just so we showed our relationship to the residential. Okay, the site survey, basically what shows here is, again, it's an aerial, or it's a regular survey with an aerial photograph on it that just shows that the site, the way it is right now, it's pretty much just the old paving that has remained from the BP station, and then they tore the building down and they put gravel on that, but basically a lot of hard surface just remains on that site. The sorry, I'm taking so long in between, but it wants to not get back as quickly.
That's all right. Take your time, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. Almost there. Okay, this is our site plan, and again, we have our Market Avenue and our Maple Street. At the center of the site, basically, is our, I'm going to say it's about a 256 feet, or 215 square feet structure. It's not really a building. No occupancy is going to be inside of it. And I have that in the center, which is going to basically house statues from the original founders of Walsh, or the chapter in Maine. These are historic statues that are coming down and are going to be set underneath the statue. We have basically sidewalks coming in from both the, I'll say, north and east sides, and then we show another sidewalk coming back to an existing gravel parking lot that would be right adjacent to the baseball building. Again, it's gravel, and down the road, this will be improved, and then we are showing where they would pick up handicap accessible parking spaces here adjacent to our site. Basically, we have concrete sidewalks. The cross sidewalks in the structure itself are going to be a textured stained concrete, and then the pavers on the four corners are going to be similar to the pavers and stone edge that are installed throughout campus currently. Okay, the next plan is our landscape plan, and this was put together by Enviroscapes. And you can see our main center here, and then our patio area around that. Our statues will be in the center, and then we have landscaping around the perimeter of that. In the front, we have a low wall, stone wall, and then there'll be some lighting on that, and we have pictures of what that would look like. And these will mostly be annuals up here, so they'll change with the season. Then we've got existing trees to the west. We've added additional trees to the south as a buffer. And then we have major planting areas on each entrance of the sidewalk to our site. We don't have trees, shrubs around the open perimeter facing Maple and Market, again, to keep the view through Walsh statues in this monument visible. More planning details. This is Kevin's civil drawings, which basically is taking out all the pavement, and then we're just picking up. It's going to be mostly grass areas except for the sidewalk, and then where the statues are will be a concrete pad. The rest of it's going to be grass area with the landscaping we just reviewed. The amount of paving that's remaining is less than the paving that is being demolished as part of the demo part of the project. C200 is just a series of site drawings, and we have it's not raised up on a high mountain. It's basically just a little bit higher than the sidewalk from Market. So again, it doesn't want to be down in a hole, so it's basically just a little bit higher than that sidewalk. This is our structural drawings, which basically our building is a steel structure with masonry and stone on the lower portion and synthetic plaster on the upper portion. And these are just all the steel columns and the steel framing that are going to be part of the project to support it. Okay. This is our sheet 4.1, our floor plan sheet, or it was there. It's coming. So basically on this sheet, I'm going to raise it up a little bit more. Right here, we see the ground level plan. We see the ground level plan. This is where the statue is located in the center of that. And then this is all basically a concrete pad. And with the statues in the center, these four corners are steel in the center, block and brick, stone at those areas. Then we go up and we have the clock level, and we have access to get into that space so that we have the four clock faces that are tied together, and they're on a computer system in that space. It's like the ceiling plan. I'll talk here and I'll show again when I get to the sections where some of the lighting in this area is, but here you can see we have four circles, which are down lights that'll be located up in the ceiling above the statues be shining down on the statues. And then I'll let our electrical and civil engineer talk to that later on when we get into lighting in more detail. This is the roof plan, and basically that's just like an EPDM roof system that we have drains in there, and then in the four corners we have our support for the spire that goes up, and then I've got, and he'll show too, because we have light fixtures here that'll be mounted, and you'll see it on the electrical drawings, but it'll be mounted to these vertical posts of the spire, and then that'll be shining up to highlight that. And again, Kevin will talk more to that when we get to that point. This is my section, and I'll go through here. Again, our statues that are set on their existing granite base, then we will, at this level, which will be the floor of the clock tower itself, or the clock area, we'll have downlights that'll shine down into that. So again, that won't spill out much away from that. And then we come up and we have the spire portion of that. Now, I'm just going to go and give us dimensions on that, just so you know where we are height-wise. From the grade to about, I'll call it the parapet area, is about 24 feet. And then from that point up to the top, we're 24.9. So our overall height of everything is 48 feet 9 inches. Now, that, in going through our pre-meeting with part of the group in the city, that meets that's less than the zoning required height, and also is less than the building code height permitted for this building. And then these are just some more details showing that our parapet and then how the steel spire comes down in and rests on the beams. All right, Kevin, do you want to take over now on the lighting portion of it?
Yeah, go ahead. This is Kevin Noble. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Kevin Noble from the engineering firm Sheezer Buckley Mayfield, 1540 Corporate Woods Parkway, Uniontown, Ohio. And I was also sworn in with Joe at the beginning of the meeting. So our office provided engineering services for the project, both electrical and site civil. On the site civil end of things, we did grading and we did storm sewer. The site currently slopes towards East Maple Street, and there is a basin on site that basically connects to a storm sewer that crosses East Maple, and that was kind of the junction that was used with the gas station for the overland runoff. We're using the same system. We're putting some small basins around just to make sure that we don't have any ponding on site. We do have less impervious area now than we did before, so we're actually reducing the stormwater runoff into that system. So that's a little bit on the site for the grading and the storm. We also did electrical, and so Joe's talked a little bit about it, but I guess I wanted to kind of give you a summary of the different type of fixtures you'll see with this project. We have two different sets that are serving the tower himself. We have 4 recessed lights that Joe showed on the ceiling space, and those are down lights, and they shine on the. We then have 4 uplights with shields. They are on the spire itself. They're mounted on the spire, and they will. They are faced upwards. We did photometrics for this project, and we submitted that with our application. Code says no more than 0.5 foot candles at the property line, which we've done. We also tried to do the same thing with the top of that spire, just trying to control or minimize any type of the atmospheric pollution that we have. And we were pretty successful in doing that. The photometric programs out there really aren't made to try to do something in a vertical up direction, but I think we've got a pretty good handle on that. So, we're trying to be sensitive to atmospheric pollution and trying to basically say at the top of the spire, we want to have 0.5 foot candles and meet what we have down below. So those are the two different groups that we have on the tower itself. We have three then different types on site on ground. These three different types I'm going to talk about, these are all low voltage. They're 12 voltage systems, 12 volt systems. We have pole lights, and one pole light's going to be on each of the three sidewalks that are coming into the tower. That's one group of fixtures. Then we have eight accent lights, and these accent lights have cutoffs to them, and these accent lights are pointed upwards, and they're underneath 8 of the trees that are being planted on the project. And then the last set we have 5 wall lights, accent lights again, and they're facing the wall that is the monument wall that we have for the project. And what we've done with those also have cutoffs to it. We're trying to be sensitive to any glare that we'd get off of Market Avenue North or East Maple Street. And so the way we have those aligned, and it's kind of shown on our E200 plan, but the way we have those aligned, we've kind of pointed them inward to the sign away from that road. And on the plan, we kind of put some arrows, or we put some boundary lines showing where that glare, where the illumination will be. So those are the 5 different types of fixtures that we have on this project.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation you have here. And I guess with that, I'm going to see if there are any comments from the city. Mr. Van Gundy, do you have anything to add?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We also did a pre-application meeting and had several conversations and follow-up. Would like to say we appreciate the design thought that went into the project, and look forward to seeing this being a vital part of one of the gateways into the city. The project does meet the requirements of the zoning code. Staff does recommend approval for the conditional use permit for the project. I also included as part of the agenda packet a letter from the fire department, actually on this project and the previous one, that fire department approved as submitted as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Gundy. And I think just want to mention that we are, at this point, would be looking for a motion, or I guess questions from the rest of the commission members, but this is in regards to the conditional use portion of the agenda. So at that, if there's anything from the members.
This is Brian Mahalson. Just a real quick comment. I think this is a great addition to this corner, and I think Kathleen and Enviroscapes did a great job with this.
I think I would agree as well, Mr. Mahalson. Any other questions or comments from the members of the Planning Commission?
Yeah, this is Tom Sarah. Just, Mr. Kaplan, can you just address for the Planning Commission I understand you're going to have security cameras that will be in the area.
This is Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I think Joe's saying he is still muted, so he could not respond, but I can respond to that question. Right now, we are taking conduits out to that site. So the project specifically doesn't have them in it, but the intent is when they further develop that area, the kind of baseball area with the parking lot, that they're going to put some cameras out there. But right now, we're just going to pull some conduits from the baseball building and put them out to a handhold for future security reasons.
Thank you. So the area is going to be well lit. It's not going to be too bright for traffic. There is on the platform where the statues are, there is a elevation change, but it's not really intended for people to necessarily walk up for a handicap. It's just to be able to walk around it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarah. Are there any other comments? Or is there at this point? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Bowles.
This is Peter Volas. What is the timeline for the project?
Well, I'll probably ask Marty, what's the status of the approval on the drawings that we submitted? And if we're ready to go, I'm assuming that they would start construction almost immediately. And that's what the intent was before the virus.
This is Martin here. Plans are approved. We'll be able to issue a permit as soon as tomorrow, provided the project is issued the approvals tonight. We can issue permits tomorrow on that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Van Gundy.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe at this point, because this is part of the adjudication hearing, if there are members of the public that wish to offer evidence for or against the application, would be appropriate for the commission to hear those before it takes its vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. That's correct. Yes, is there anybody from the public who wishes to offer evidence for this portion of the adjudication hearing? Is that someone trying to come on, or is that not the case?
Nobody is unmuted from the public.
Okay. Well, thank you. I guess with that, then I guess I'll bring it back to members of the commission. Do we have a motion for the conditional use for this project?
I will make this time, Sarah. I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the monument clock tower at Walsh University.
And we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
This is Brian Mahalson. I'll second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahalson. We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call roll?
Yes. Mr. McLeaser?
Yes.
Mr. Sarah?
Yes.
Mr. Del Pez?
Yes.
Mr. Volas?
Yes.
And Mr. Mahalshan?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the conditional use portion, which is item number 4 on the agenda, has passed. And that will bring us into item number 5, which is, this is the application. This is the preliminary and final development plan for the monument clock tower at Walsh University. Is there anything additional that needs to be added from the applicant?
I think we're good with the information we presented. If there's any other questions, we'd be glad to address them for you. Thank you.
And thank you, sir. And Mr. Van Gundy, anything additional to add before we vote or move on the process for this?
No, sir. We covered it fairly well during the presentation of the conditional use permit. Staff is also in support of approval on the both development plan reviews on the project, and again, look forward to seeing its completion.
Thank you, Mr. Van Gundy. Anything from the commission members?
Nope.
Anybody from the general public have any further comments in regards to the clock tower? With that, I would entertain a motion
This is Eric Delpez. I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion from Mr. Delapez. Do we have a second?
Tom Sarah will second it.
We have a motion and a second for the approval or for the item as presented. Could we please call for a vote?
Mr. McLeister,
Yes.
Mr. Delpez,
Yes.
Mr. Sarah,
Yes.
Mr. Volas,
Yes.
and Mr. Mahalchin.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, item has passed. We have previously discussed item number 6 on the agenda, so we're going to move on to number 7. And what this is a resolution requesting the Planning Commission to recommend to City Council amendments to the North Canton's codified ordinance, and this would be Chapter 1133 for single-family and two-family residential districts, and Section 113308 accessory use regulations, subsection E, which has to do with fences and walls. And with that, Mr. Van Gundy, are you able to walk us through this?
Yes, I am. We are pulling up the exhibits here. As soon as we get those pulled up here, I will request control of the screen. Be getting started here. There's a bit of a delay. I see what Mr. Caplia was experiencing. Okay. So in general, this item proposes a complete strikeout of the existing language found in 113308, parent E. We would be taking all of that subsection out and replacing it in its entirety with the proposed language here on the screen. And this does several things here. This provides regulations for fences that we don't currently have. It also addresses walls and hedges, which we do not currently have. That is unregulated. One thing to note on that is if this does move through the legislative process and ultimately gets adopted, once it's enacted, any existing installations would still be regulated under the current rules. So let's say there are hedges that are in violation of the new ordinance. Those can remain as long as they qualify as a non-conforming use in the code, which identifies particular criteria, how they're to be maintained, and explicitly states you can't expand it or in some cases can't replace them. At any rate, so this new fence ordinance wouldn't be, sweep across the city and get everything in compliance. So with that clarification, this first paragraph, if I can get the screen to go back to the first paragraph. At any rate, it talks about and clarifies that a zoning certificate, when it's required, and also talks about when it's not required. And essentially, a new fence would require a zoning certificate. And this, again, we don't have this current clarification on when a zoning certificate applies to fences. Now, this you'll find there's language that talks about repairs of existing fences. In general, does not require a zoning certificate. Essentially, a fence can be repaired without having to come and get a permit for the fence, or a zoning certificate rather. We often will synonymously refer to the zoning certificate as a permit. The second subsection B talks about hedges and those invisible fences that are often underground used for keeping the pets on the property. Those would not require a zoning certificate as well. So the next section where we get into the general requirements, here we're starting to clarify and define really some dimensions that are outlined already, and they've been utilized through the ODOT standards. This puts it in with the fence ordinance and clarifies, what is that safety vision clearance for traffic. And on corner parcels where we have the 4 streets at the intersection, essentially, as you see in the diagram on the screen, it's 30 feet in each direction. And where that comes important is here, not too much further ahead. It does limit the height of the fence in those areas generally to 3 foot. On the next page, try to get that clicked over. Here it starts clarifying or establishing rather a site triangle for driveways where they intersect with streets. So, folks can pull in and out of their driveway without having a fence obstruct their vision and pulling out onto the street. And as you know, some of the streets are very busy and you need that area to see the oncoming traffic. Let's see, this does not want to be moving ahead. I apologize for that. So it's hard to gauge where it's going to end up. Jump ahead too far. It jumps quite a bit ahead. At any rate, there's again clarification in there, which talks about where fences can and cannot encroach. For example, obviously they need to be maintained on the property in which the property owner is, and you would think that's common. However, we often see fences that someone trying to maximize their property and generally not so much paying attention to the actual property lines. So there's some clarification in that, some maintenance. Now, materials rather, it talks about the materials of the fence. There's some clarification in here. It talks about, prohibiting electric fences, barbed wire fences, or, other types of even razor wire fences and those types of things. There are other sections within the code which prohibit some of this, but again, it puts it in with the fence ordinance and it makes it part of the zoning review, where some of the other places that you'll see some of these is in more of a criminal part of the code. So this does clarify the types of fence materials permitted in front yards. I do see in here where some of these lists can be modified, and if it is voted on as an approval, we can modify these to send it on to City Council as a recommendation with changes. So if you are seeing changes which you would like to see, happy to talk about those as well. Okay, so clarification on the measurement. This talks about, of course, where the property line is parallel, or the fence rather. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the property line, but if the fence is parallel to either an incline or a decline, that's this detail we're seeing here that we do need to take in consideration of within that 3 foot area away from the fence. The next detail we're seeing here is a clarification where the fence is running across the contour. This makes it a requirement that the fence follows the contour, so we're not seeing those gaps underneath the fence. And we do see those at times. Let's see. Again, some more clarification on the height of the wall if it's put on top of a retaining wall. That jumped ahead quite a bit again. Let me get back to that. When we start getting into retaining walls here, I do want to go over some of that. In general, we don't have anything which specifically regulates retaining walls. I mean, in some cases it is a fence, in other cases it's not, and it wouldn't necessarily have zoning regulations that talks about how to configure or place a retaining wall in relation to property lines or even site distances to the road. The proposed language would have some limitations on heights of the wall. Also talks about essentially when a building permit's required, that it needs to go through the chief building official for application of either the Ohio Building Code or the Residential Code of Ohio. Also talks about and has language that would limit essentially a high wall or a tall retaining wall on a property line. Theoretically, with our current language, we can have a retaining wall right to the property line where maybe the house sits up higher than the road. So when you're walking on the sidewalk, you could be up against a 6 foot, 8 foot high retaining wall where the slopes warranted that. Where the language proposed here does require some terracing, so it's a bit more appealing. We get some landscaping in there, and we don't end up with a very tall wall at the right of way. And there is a picture in there which I think it skipped past when trying to progress in the proposed language here. Is there any questions to this up to this point?
This is Brian Mahalson. One question I had, kind of minor, is with regard to hedgerows, and that they would be anything new would be regulated for height. And I'm thinking about the scenario where you've got an intersection where you've got new hedgerow that's regulated by maintenance, and on another corner could be unregulated based on it having already been grandfathered in.
That certainly could exist, where of course the new installation of the hedgerows would be required on that. Now, in regards to some of the site distances, those, because it is a safety hazard to the traffic, those have not been given the same exception to the zoning code. So if it is indeed obstructing traffic, we do contact the property owner and have them modify the landscaping so as to not prevent traffic from seeing around the corner in that safety triangle, and more looking at it from an ODOT standard as opposed to a zoning standard, where this would have clear language in the zoning code, and we would have it as part of well, not so much on the hedges, but in the fences, we would have that as part of the review process. More so.
Okay.
This is Tom Sayers. So under materials, you don't have masonry. What about all the masonry walls that are on Main Street?
So this does only apply to the residential zone districts. So theoretically, I just off memory, I don't know that we have any residential zone districts on Main Street. So this would not be a conflict with the masonry wall on Main Street. However, if that is a material that we would like to see in there, we can certainly put that in there. Not really intended to be an all-encompassing list, but we can certainly modify that. Another one is chain link. Chain link is not on that list, but is a fairly common type of fence. And they can, of course, be done so they are appealing, but you get some of the chain link fence that are not so appealing, particularly where you put the privacy slats in there and, of course, don't maintain them. Some of the color coded chain link fences, could be something that we consider as part of this in the front yard, particularly if that's the direction we want to go in.
So in a residential area where some people have like a masonry lamppost or entrance into their residence, is that going to be considered a wall? I mean, they have like a brick column.
I don't believe so. That's going to fall under our current definitions. And that sounds like it's walls and fences. That may be something that is still not specifically regulated in the zoning code, but it would not be if it's limited to that feature. Generally wouldn't define those as a fence or a wall. If I'm picturing what you're saying, that is.
I think you'd have to clarify that based on the definition of a fence, possibly by length.
Yeah, and that's the next definition I'm looking for in the current definitions. And a fence is defined as any structure composed of wood, iron, steel, masonry, stone, or other material erected in such a manner and in such location as to enclose, secure, partially enclose, or secure, provide privacy, decorate, define, or enhance all or any part of the premise. And that's a fairly broad definition. Yeah, I don't know that we would put that in that definition, though.
I would agree with you, Mr. Van Gundy. I think in a reasonable type of definition there, that it sounds more like of a decorative pedestal or something for a light, a pole or mailbox, perhaps something along those lines, and that in that type of application, it wouldn't be unreasonable not to include that as far as your definition of a fence.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one other comment as far as clarification on the types of fence allowed. I mean, I don't want to sound too restrictive, but I really don't think there's any place in front yard for chain link fence in residential, regardless of whether it's got slats or not. I mean, is there any way of restricting that? It's just chain link is not appropriate for front yard.
So as the language is before you, it does not include or permit, if you will, chain link fence in the front yard. And if I can get back to this previous page, we can look at that language if it doesn't jump too far backwards.
I agree with Mr. Mahouse, and I don't believe we have any currently, or that there's any desire to see chain link fences in the front yards.
Right, and I concur as well.
Okay. If you have the exhibit, this would be exhibit 7-2 on page 3 of 6. Item C, towards the top of the page, it does say the style or type of fence permitted in the front yard shall be picket, split rail, wrought iron, solid vinyl, painted aluminum, welded steel, or hedges. Chain link is not included in that. So if this were to proceed as presented, it would not allow chain link fence in the front yard.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Van Gundy. Are there any other questions as of this point before Mr. Van Gundy proceeds?
No.
Okay. So another, was there one more? Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess I want to go back to the masonry issue, whether that should be added, because, let me use an example. Going to Fieldcrest, there is a masonry wall. And people do build going into the residential allotments, walls at their entrance drives. So should masonry be really added as an acceptable material? I just want to make sure we're not missing this. I mean, I'm using Fieldcrest because everyone knows it, right?
I think Bobolink has something similar as well.
You're right, yeah.
And if that is the desire the commission would like to go, I would recommend that we try to be specific in the masonry. As you know, the CMU is technically, the concrete masonry unit is technically a masonry wall, and those are not appealing in the least bit, as you know.
Well, unless I put stucco over it. I know I'm making this a lot more complicated, but I just want to make sure, I see that could happen to having some type of a hard surface material. So I just want to make sure we're not missing it.
This is Eric Delpace. Mr. Van Gundy does, I guess, this is somewhat confusing when we're talking about fences and ultimately walls, because we're defining a fence, but then we also reference walls throughout this section. And I guess in the wall definition, is that defining masonry, or I think that's leading to some of the confusion with this, because to Mr. Sarah's point, people do masonry walls in the front yard or, beside the driveway and an entrance to a home that's on a larger lot. So I wouldn't consider that a fence. I would consider that a wall. So is the wall being defined somewhere, that what materials are acceptable for a wall? Because, in some of this, it talks about fences are walls, and then it defines a fence, being somewhat opaque, but a wall being solid, and solid fences or walls. So I guess that's the question. Where is wall defined, what it is defined as? Because I wouldn't consider what Mr. Sarah is saying as a fence. I would consider, well, that would fall under the wall section.
I agree with that logic. I mean, a board-on-board fence is not a wall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that's what's kind of, I think partially the way some of this is written, it kind of conflates the two definitions and kind of crosses them over somewhat, where it seems like they should be more specifically separated, I guess.
That is a good point, and I don't see where the wall materials, where we are specific to, to, say, a retaining wall in the front yard.
I would agree, and specifically in reference to a landscape wall versus a retaining wall, whereas one has structural properties, the other does not.
Right. Yeah, so I will make a note here to clarify on the materials. That material section would apply to the walls particularly. We can add a section there which clarifies that the masonry walls are permitted with some language to keep it more of a architecturally pleasing wall as opposed to having just a plain CMU wall in the front of the property.
Do we need to define that further as far as what materials, or I guess is leaving it just saying that it needs to be decorative in nature or more pleasing? I mean, does that cover our bases here for what we're trying to accomplish?
That works for me.
Okay.
I think if you go any further than decorative, you're verging on an architectural review board type of criteria.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Agreed.
Okay, any other comments or questions as of this point? Okay, Mr. Van Gundy, you can take us further into this if you'd like.
Okay, so
one more page, right?
Yeah, I think we're halfway. Yeah, so on the heights of the wall for solid fences, we're keeping with the existing language on the height for the 24 inches, particularly, in the front yard or side yards. One exception that is new here that, we're trying to get some of these fences to be more consistent with readily available products. The current ordinance requires now where they can exceed the 24 inches by going to a more open type fence, they can do the 36-inch fence. But that material, as I understand, which has been reported to us through a couple different fence contractors and several residents, that the 36-inch fence is a special order item, and they end up paying a significant stipend to order that 36-inch fence as opposed to the 48-inch fence. What this exception does on the paragraph, I'm on page 3 of 6. Excuse me, I'm looking at
page 5.
Yeah, 5. Thank you. Get back to that. Top of page 5. So, yeah, Mr. McLeese, you are correct. I stand corrected on the number of pages left.
No problem.
At any rate, yeah. So this does allow the 48-inch fence, and it also gives an additional 12 inches of lattice work where in the instance of we have 2 corner side yards which abut each other essentially, and this is in the diagram we're looking at here is that situation where we don't have the front yards we're trying to align, so essentially we can run that taller fence along that. It would be either the right or left side of those that diagram there. That's that first paragraph. So we have, and again, if we get away the 20 feet away from the right-of-way lines, again, this is not considering those site triangles. The site triangles, we're still going to be limited in height. The double frontage lots, this is where that's also an example there. we do encounter this occasionally with parcels that go from street to street, and this provides some regulation on where to put that fence, so we don't have potentially a fence all the way out at the right of way, a 6-foot fence. This will have, sat back on there. So we're taking in consideration the rest of the block as part of that. Again, we don't have any language on that specifically that limits the 6-foot fence from going out to the public right of way in the rear yard. So then we get into the regulations for hedges that talk about the height of essentially 6 feet in height in any front side yard. And again, we're going to keep it in line with the fence regulations and trying to keep the hedges more in line with that. As you know, the arborvitae get fairly tall, so this would be some regulations that would require some height limits on that. So when it talks about temporary, was there somebody chiming in? No, okay. Temporary fences, and clarifying that we don't need to get a zoning certificate for temporary fences, for construction sites and so forth. And then again, a maintenance clause in there to refer back to if we have an issue or a complaint on the fence, we have some parameters there to apply to any fence of concern. So with that, I will answer any questions if you had any additional questions or.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Van Gundy. And yeah, as he said, do we have any questions or comments from members of the commission? At that point, would we have any comments from members of the community? Okay, I think, unless anybody objects, I think we could entertain a motion at this point to send this resolution over to the, or send this proposal over to the city council.
I will, this Tom Stero, make a motion that we send it to city council for review. With one modification, we clarify the materials to address a masonry wall and the material in the material section.
We have a motion on the table from Mr. Sarah. Do we have a second?
This is Brian Mahalson. I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Could we please call for a vote?
Robert McCleister,
Yes.
Mr. Del Paz,
Yes.
Mr. Sarah,
Yes.
Mr. Volis,
Yes.
and Mr. Mahalshin.
Yes.
All right. Well, that motion carries. And with that, I don't see anything remaining on our agenda this evening. Thank you guys all for working through the technology issues. And is there, I think at this point we can just, I'm sorry?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. So we have a motion for adjourn. Second?
And I'm sorry, who made the motion to adjourn?
Tom Sarah.
Thank you.
And do we have a second?
This is Brian Mahalson. I'll second.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess all those in favor say aye.
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 Good job.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.